UMERADIO Morning Show. And of course, it's now 8 o'clock in the morning, and the time when we go to the news and look at what's happening in the world today. And our news coverage comes from the front page of the New York Times, of course. And that's what we're going to be looking at now. The New York Times, all the news that's fit to print. New York, New York, New York. Hello, New York. Today is Friday, February 14, 2020. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It is 2020, okay? And it's already February. Like before you know it, it's going to be March and April and May. You know what I mean? Anyway, we start with the weather today. And let me just check this. There we go. Today we start with the weather. And it says today will be breezy, colder, mostly sunny, high 31. But for tonight it will be clear, cold, low 17. And for tomorrow, sunny, cold, light wind, high 32. Wind north at 4 to 8 miles per hour. And the weather map can be seen on page A24. And for those of you who, if you want to follow what I'm reading, you can go to our app, UME Radio, or go to our website, umeradio.com. Click on e-newspaper and choose the New York Times February or 2020, and you can see exactly what it is that I'm reading to you right now. I'm sharing with you. You see the information, and every morning I try to describe to you what I see on the front page, the image that I'm seeing, and this is interesting. Clearly, this is China, and you can see, so there are 7 persons on the street. There are 2 persons in like a yellow vest, so I suspect those people represent the medical fraternity, the Ministry of Health or whatever it is that they have there. And one is it's taking notes, while the other, I think is like he's spraying someone or testing someone, but he has his hand is up and he has like a thing, it's a medical thing. It's something like a gun-like look. It's not a gun. It's not a gun. It's a medical thing. It's just how it looks like the way he's holding it up. It looks like it's a spray gun, like a liquid spray gun. And then you have another person. Everyone is in masks. Oh man. So we know we're talking about the coronavirus for sure. The subtext beneath that says a health worker checked a pedestrian for fever in Guangzhou on Thursday as China stepped up its campaign to halt an epidemic. Yeah, so that's what that is. One person is on a bike, 2 ladies are going down the road, but they're looking back at what's happening. And the medical people have this like a makeshift table. Yeah, and they're taking notes. They're trying to stop it because this thing is has gotten out of control. China expanding a virus dragnet. That's a headline. Seizing possible patients in 2 additional cities. And this story is by Amy Kin. China's leaders expanded a mass roundup of people possibly sickened with the coronavirus on Thursday, widening their dragnet well beyond the epicenter of the outbreak to at least 2 more cities in what the government has called a wartime campaign to stamp out the epidemic. But the campaign, first announced last week in the city of Wuhan, already has been marred by chaotic conditions that have isolated vulnerable patients without adequate care and in some cases left them alone to die. The expansion of the decree to round up everyone who should be rounded up in the Wuhan area of central China has deepened the nation's sense of anxiety. In their zeal to execute the edict, officials in Wuhan, officials in Wuhan area, in Wuhan, yes, a metropolis of 11 million, have haphazardly seized patients who have not yet tested positive for the coronavirus, in some cases herding them onto buses with no protective measures, where they risked infection from others, their relatives said. After that, patients have been sent to makeshift medical facilities that don't provide the support they need to recover, with little to no dedicated medical staff on hand to help. Some patients die. One woman was abruptly carted off to a quarantine facility and prohibited from retrieving her supply of heart medication, her daughter-in-law said. A man said he was getting sicker and sicker in his hotel room, but there were no doctors and he was not allowed to leave. Another man, placed in a makeshift shelter, fell into a coma for 2 days, but his family said they couldn't get him admitted to a hospital. He died. Despite the upheaval, the mass roundup extended beyond Wuhan to include other cities in central Hubei province that had been hit hard by the outbreak. The state-run CCTV news broadcaster said the expanded area included the cities of Huangguang and I can't pronounce that one, Xiaogan, Saigon, one of them, Saigon perhaps, I'm not sure. A sudden spike in new cases could make the situation worse. This is terrible. This story continues on page A28. And all the stories on the front page, that one was not even the first story, but let's look at the first one. We're back with Trump again. Barr says attacks from Trump make work impossible. Rare rebuke by a sitting cabinet member, "I'm not going to be bullied," by Katie Benner. Attorney General P. Barr delivered an extraordinary rebuke of President Trump on Thursday, saying that his attacks on the Justice Department had made it impossible for me to do my job, and that I'm not going to be bullied or influenced by anybody. Mr. Barr has been among the president's most loyal allies and denigrated by Democrats as nothing more than his personal lawyer, but he publicly challenged Mr. Trump in a way that no sitting cabinet member has. Whether it's Congress, newspaper, editorial boards, or the president, I'm going to do what I think is right, Mr. Barr said in an interview with ABC News, echoing comments he made a year ago at his confirmation hearing. I cannot do my job here at the department with a constant background commentary that undercuts me. Mr. Barr's remarks were aimed at containing the fallout from the department's botched handling of its sentencing, recommending for Mr. Trump's longtime friend Roger Stone Jr., who was convicted on 7 felonies in a bid to obstruct a congressional investigation that threatened the president. After career prosecutors initially recommended a sentence of 7 to 9 years in prison, Mr. Trump spent days attacking them, the department, and the judge presiding over Mr. Stone's case. Such tweets make it impossible for me to do my job and to assure the courts and the prosecutors in the department that we're doing our work with integrity, Mr. Barr said. He added, "It's time to stop the tweeting about Department of Justice criminal cases. The fallout from the Stone episode threatened to spin out of control after the 4 prosecutors on the case withdrew from it, and Mr. Trump widened his attacks on law enforcement, thrusting Mr. Barr into a full-blown crisis. Career prosecutors began to express worry that their work could be used to settle political scores and doubts that he could protect them from political interference." That story continues on page A19. That's just terrible. It's just terrible. Distasteful. Another story on the front page. Man, I'm trying hard not to have an opinion, but this is just terrible. I mean, what kind of precedence is this setting for the rest of the world? And we all know that people do what America does, in the Western world. This is just terrible. Like, what examples are we setting for the up and coming, for the young lawyers, for youth, persons, the ones who are coming up? Hi, Atik. Good evening. Like what kind of examples are we setting when we're talking about the presidential space, the presidential role of the United States. I mean, I don't care who's wrong or right. This has just got to stop. Like, there has to be another way to handle this public crisis, craziness. Is just, I mean, while people are over in China dying, like, isn't there anything better we can do? This is just crazy. Another story on the front page is, for 9 months, a U.S.-Iran duel of misjudgments. How pressure tactics pushed adversaries to brink of war. This article is by Mark Mazzetti, Ronan Bergman, and Farnaz Fasihi. In late September, a plane carrying senior Iran officials touched down in Abu Dhabi, the gleaming capital of the United Arab Emirates. The Middle East had witnessed a summer of violence, and a meeting with the Iranians was part of a quiet strategy by Emirati leaders to diffuse the tension. The small but powerful Persian Gulf nation wanted to broker a separate peace, avoiding violence that could shatter its decades-long effort to present itself as a modern, stable oasis in a volatile region. But the meeting set off alarm inside the White House, where officials learned about it only after reading reports from American spy agencies. The Emirati government, a stalwart ally that had long pushed for a hawkish American approach toward Iran, was in secret talks with Iranian officials. National Security Council officials met to discuss the implications. A united front against Iran, carefully built by the Trump administration over more than 2 years, seemed to be crumbling. The episode came in the midst of a 9-month period that shook up the United States' already combustible relationship with Iran, beginning with the Trump administration's escalation of sanctions and culminating with the two powers in a direct military confrontation on the brink of wider and bloodier conflict. This story continues on page 11, and another story that's under this issue is war powers. Senators passed a resolution to curtail the president's ability to attack Iran, and that story continues on page 820. Man, chaos, just chaos. Chaos. Another headline, another story: Biden banking on black votes has company. The article is by Stephanie Saul, Astide W. Herndon, and Jonathan Martin. And there's a photo of Michael R. Bloomberg there as well. He's standing at a podium with the U.S. flag behind him. That's another story. Okay, even before the final results from New Hampshire showed Joseph R. Biden Jr. finishing a distant 5th there, the former vice president had flown to South Carolina on Tuesday night for a gathering of enthusiastic supporters. A gospel choir sang about salvation, a fitting choice for a candidate who is counting on the state's large black electorate to save his third try for the White House. Up to now, we haven't heard from the most committed constituency of the Democratic Party, the African American community. Mr. Biden told about 200 attendees, many of them black. He added 99.9%. That's the percentage of African American voters that have not yet had a chance to vote in America. The ability to mobilize black support in South Carolina, which holds its primary on February 29 and across the South, has long been the foundation of Mr. Biden's candidacy. A presumed advantage that would highlight his capacity to forge a diverse coalition to take down President Trump. Yet, as Mr. Biden looks to black voters to resurrect his candidacy after defeats in both Iowa and New Hampshire, cracks have appeared in that support. In some polls and among influential local and national Democrats who are saying out loud what many have privately believed all along, that he was a safe, familiar political harbor for them as much as an object of affection. This story continues on page A16. And over to Michael R. Bloomberg. Cash and perks for AIDS boy. Bloomberg bid. Okay. And this story is by Rebecca Ruiz. In a warehouse covered in murals in the design district here, cater waiters served wine and platters of Cuban sandwiches, some rolls, and kosher pigs in a blanket. They were all black, but for red, white, and blue T-shirts, reading, "I like Mike Bloomberg." Before the candidate took the stage, set against an oversized painting reading Mike 2020 that a local artist had been paid thousands to produce in 36 hours, the former mayor of Miami Beach, Philip Levine, introduced him. We both started from nothing and we made a few bucks," Mr. Levine said, proudly likening himself to Michael R. Bloomberg, the former New York City mayor who announced his run for president in November. But he's got more zeros at the end of his name than I do. Mr. Bloomberg, the multi-billionaire behind Bloomberg LP, has poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the race, paying to make his voice omnipresent on television and radio. That story continues on page A18. And I think this is the final story. The final story on the front page is on the air in Kansas City, Russian propaganda. And there is another photo there. KCXL, a radio station near Kansas City, airs Radio Sputnik content during peak driving times. I guess this is a photo of the station. There's a car outside and a building and nothing else in sight, just the building and the car. This story is by Neil McFarquhar, something like that. McFarquhar, not sure. For a price, 3 stations host Radio Sputnik. When commuters spin the radio dial as they drive through Kansas City, these days, between the strains of classic rock and country hits, they can tune into something unexpected. Russian, agitprop, 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 something like that. In January, Radio Sputnik, a propaganda arm of the Russian government, started broadcasting on 3 Kansas City area radio stations during prime drive times. even sharing one frequency with a station rooted in the city's historic jazz district. Who needs a ridiculous Red Dawn invasion? A participant in one online forum wrote about the new broadcasts. Your overlord, Mr. Putin, will be addressing you soon, so it's best to prepare now, another commenter wrote, referring to President Vladimir Putin of Russia. In the United States, talk radio on Sputnik covers the political spectrum from right to left, but the constant backbeat is that America is damaged goods. Sputnik's American hosts follow a standard talk radio format, riffing on the day's headlines and bantering with guests and callers. They find much to dislike in America, from the reporting of the coronavirus epidemic to the impeachment of President Trump, and they play on internal divisions as well. The story continues on page A13. And in other headlines, in international headlines, how Dresden looked in 1945. Germany commemorated 75 years since the Allied attack, but the milestone has taken on new meaning. Questions on Taliban peace deal. How would an agreement actually work? As a start, all sides are supposed to halt attacks for 1 week, page A5. And in New York, battling over bail reform, a proposal in the state Senate to modify a new bail law has divided Democrats in one of Albany's most bitterly fought debates, page 25. And in Sports Friday, building a career and a home, Pat Connaughton of the Milwaukee Bucks is continuing a family tradition of working in real estate. Chastened but still champs, Houston Astros players apologized for cheating, but insisted they earned the 2017 World Series title. And in national headlines, weaker mileage rules stall President Trump's rollback of Obama-era fuel economy rules may not be ready until summer, if ever, page A21. Giving more a second chance, Virginia, newly dominated by Democrats, may broaden parole. Other states are watching. And in business headlines, a strong work order on Jedi. In a victory for Amazon, a federal judge told Microsoft to halt all activity on a $10 billion cloud computing contract for the Pentagon until the internet giant's legal challenge has resolved. That's on page B1. New charges against Huawei, an indictment for racketeering and conspiracy to steal trade secrets escalates the Trump administration's pressure campaign against the Chinese telecommunications giant. That story is on page B1, and that ends our news roundup for today. That's all that's on the New York Times front page. Wow, it's the news is something, right?